A lot of us have played Battleground Blitz and its current iteration on retail, but what will the mode actually look like when raiding is attached to it? The War Within is just over a month away, and with that is coming the new rated mode for PvP, Battleground Blitz. Today, I'll be taking an in-depth look at Battleground Blitz and going over my excitement for the new mode, as well as some concerns I have which Blizzard needs to address early on if they want the mode to be a success. So, what is Battleground Blitz? Battleground Blitz is Blizzard's take on a solo queue mode of rated battlegrounds. In Battleground Blitz, you have two teams of 8 players fighting against each other on the current map pool of battlegrounds, with each team being respectively balanced to 2 healers and 5 to 6 DPS dependent on if there is a tank present. For a lot of people, this mode brings a lot of excitement as it fundamentally removes the barriers and meta requirements of trying to get into rated battlegrounds, where many groups end up waiting anywhere between half an hour to an hour depending on what roles they need filled. Additionally, as battlegrounds are the more accessible PvP mode compared to 2v2 and 3v3 arena, this gives players who are interested in trying rated PvP out an avenue to do so that's not as high stress as, say, a mode such as arena. As for myself, I'm personally very excited about the prospect of this new PvP mode because I personally love Battleground PvP. However, I've never been a fan of the current rated battleground community scene because the higher you climb up in the ladder, you get exposed to some less than desirable characters, be it due to toxicity, degeneracy, boosting, win trading, or a strict adherence to the meta, or else you will not be invited to a group. Additionally, one of the main issues with rated battlegrounds is that because you had to fill a specific composition of 1 tank, 3 healers, and 6 DPS, you wanted to bring the most absolute meta classes you can to increase your chances of winning, because you risk your entire group falling apart and having to wait another 30 minutes to an hour to fill it back up should you lose one game. So I feel like this providing more accessibility to rated PvP is going to be a great thing for the game overall, and will allow players who don't necessarily play the most meta specs to have an option to jump in and join in on the action without being declined from the entire 6 groups that are on at any given time. That being said, with my excitement, I do have a lot of concerns, which I'll be going over now. So some of my concerns are going to be entirely ladder specific, while some are going to be more specific to the higher MMR, where you'll see certain things develop more frequently. So I do want to mention that I absolutely love the fact that healers have the ability to duo queue. One of the main complaints that healers have in solo shuffle is that they feel as though there's a lack of agency, where if you have a DPS player that is exceptionally bad to where they just cannot win a round, or if they perform exceptionally well to where they stomp the other 3 DPS, the healers are stuck going in a draw. They don't win anything, they don't lose anything, they kind of just waste their time, and sometimes they even lose MMR for going into a draw. Giving healers the ability to queue with somebody else, I would say, is an objectively good thing, and incentivizes players who may not have been willing to try out healing before a good reason to try out healing, because it allows friends to be able to queue with each other. That being said, one of my main concerns with duo queue is the idea of queue syncing being a thing, and that is where you get multiple pre-made groups or multiple duos trying to queue together around the same MMR to where they can get into the same game on the same team. We see this unfortunately ravaging the random battleground and epic battleground scene, where you'll have multiple pre-mades press Q at the same time and either take the Q at the same time if they get the pop or decline, to where at least in the random battleground, like a 10v10 battleground, they will leverage an unfair advantage against the enemy team because they'll have all 10 of their players in a call compared to the other team who's composed of solo queue or duo queue players. So while I do have a concern about queue syncing, especially at the higher MMR brackets, then this will go along the lines of win trading later. I don't think this will be as big of an issue as people will make it out to be, because of the removal of faction boundaries when it comes to being able to queue for Battleground Blitz. So while it is possible that teams may try to queue sync, it's also as equally possible that the queue syncers will end up on separate teams, and therefore one's going to win, one's going to lose. Again, this may be more of an issue for win trading, but I think we'll get a little bit more on that point later. The next thing I want to talk about, and by far is going to be my absolute biggest point that Blizzard needs to address if they want this mode to succeed, is how they are going to deal with a lever situation in Battleground Blitz. With this background footage right now, you can actually see myself healing what will turn into a 7v8 on this Warsong Gulch in the unrated mode of BG Blitz. And this is something that I really want to emphasize because I don't think people understand this aspect enough, is that when you are fighting a 7 versus 8, it doesn't even matter if one of the people on the team that leaves the battleground is a healer. It can be a DPS player. The game becomes virtually unwinnable at that point. Throughout the course of this video, I'm not going to cut up the footage or anything, but you can see that my team struggles heavily trying to overcome this disparity. And even when we're able to get into a winning position later, where we're able to get the flag into our room and we're peeling the DPS off of us, we just simply do not have the DPS to outmatch theirs because they have more raw numbers than we do. It's the equivalent of trying to scoop water out of a capsizing boat. So the good news that we have going into the War Within is that Blizzard has made the no-show buff for leaving Solo Shuffle and presumably Battleground Blitz. They have made that account wide. So if you happen to rage quit out of a battleground, you are locked out from being able to queue for any rated content for 15 minutes, assuming that it is your first offense. Additionally, they've made it to where this is a stacking debuff too. So if you leave again within a certain amount of time, it will go up to 30 minutes and then an hour. Well, maybe 45. I'll admit, I didn't read the exact specific changes, but I do know that it is a stacking debuff from what I've been able to see on the current beta. But the point that I'm trying to get at is that I don't know what Blizzard has in place for if a player leaves. Does the battleground just finish out, or does it cancel? Or should it cancel if it does finish out? Because I do believe deep down that it is totally unfair for 7 players to be punished for somebody leaving. And with the current state of leaving in Solo Shuffle, where people will leave and not give a damn about the consequences, I do foresee this being an issue culturally, where it is possible that only a minority of matches will actually be a fair, balanced 8v8 game. Let's even take a malicious reason out of it, right? Let's just say that a player is playing a Battleground Blitz game and a storm knocks their internet out, causing them to disconnect. Should the other 7 players be punished for that, or should there be some sort of loss mitigation system like League of Legends has in place to deal with teams that have leavers, where maybe the team only loses half of their points as opposed to the full amount that they would lose during a loss? While I don't know the specific answer, I do feel as though that leaving is going to become a much bigger thing in Battleground Blitz than it is in Solo Shuffle, just due to the sheer amount of players there are in a game. Whereas in Solo Shuffle, you have 6, a BG Blitz game, you have 16. The chances of somebody leaving is going to be far greater just due to the sheer number of players there are in a match. And again, I truly, deeply believe that this is going to be the most critical issue that will determine if this mode is a success or if this mode is a absolute failure, crash out, disaster design. Because even though you can't really strive for perfect balance in MMO PvP, as that's sort of a novelty, when you make a mode that's formally not competitive, balance becomes a much bigger thing. And that leads me to my next talking point, which is just balance in general. So I will keep it a buck with you all. I know this, you know this, everybody knows this. If you're a beginner, if you're an advanced PvP player, when you are in Battleground PvP, not all classes are created equal. A marksman hunter or a rogue is significantly more powerful than a fire mage or an enhancement shaman. And I wonder how Blizzard's going to try and compensate for this ideal, or if this is something they've even considered at all. Because at least when I play random battlegrounds right now, it seems as though whichever team has the greater amount of marksman hunters will win, just due to their sheer damage capabilities. When you get maps such as Arathi Basin or Battle for Gilneas that are more control point oriented, a good rogue can single-handedly carry the game for their team just due to the sheer amount of control they have. And it makes me wonder if some matches are just going to be sheerly unwinnable because you get, say, like 3 warriors on one team and 4 marksman hunters on the other team. Or if one team happens to have 3 rogues, whereas another team has 0, if that tilts the scale so heavily in favor of one team just due to sheer composition. Now, while I know this isn't something that can be perfectly balanced for, because I would only imagine that queue times would skyrocket since everybody wants to play the meta thing, that's just kind of how the game works. I do wonder if Blizzard will try to implement something very similar to Solo Shuffle, where they try to put one class or one specialization of class per team, or if maybe they can, if they can possibly set it to where it tries to make the teams balanced of what classes are on each team. So for instance, like if there's an assassination rogue on one team, it's possible to have a rogue of any spec on another team, but the queue system will try to find a rogue to balance it out. And I do apologize that this video is not completely scripted, because outside of the intro, I just kind of wanted to give my thoughts off the dome. and especially coming out of this very unbalanced 7v8 Battleground Blitz mode. I do want to say though that the last thing I am really excited for about Battleground Blitz is that healers are going to be more effective overall than they are in Arena. What do I mean by this? Because of the dampening mechanic in Arena, which is a stacking healing debuff that progressively becomes greater as match progresses, healers become less effective over time in arena games. When it comes to Battlegrounds, however, this is not the case, and a good healer can keep their team alive to the extent of their mana bar and their skill. So I think that we'll see healing be a lot more rewarding of a role. I think it will be a very strong role. Probably not as strong as like a flag carrier or like a rogue or a marksman hunter, but it will be up there. And so I think you'll see more people being incentivized to heal, specifically with this whole duo queue mechanic as well, like we've discussed earlier. And I really don't see there being as big of a healer shortage as there was in, say, solo shuffle. Additionally, with the ratio of healers to DPS players being a smaller one than there is needed for a solo shuffle game to start, I feel as though that queue times will be significantly quicker than in solo shuffle right now, which will gravitate players towards wanting to play Battleground Blitz over solo shuffle. I think the last thing that Blizzard needs to do to really put the icing on the cake is allow for players to queue for solo shuffle and Battleground Blitz at the same time, because having the chance of either queue popping at any given moment will cut down on queue times across the board and will give players more incentive to play both of them. Because the biggest issue that haunted the entirety of solo shuffle in Dragonflight was that players wanted to play the game, but they couldn't play the game because they sat in these really long queues. Alright fellas, I've been yapping for a while now, so I think I'll close out the video there. If you do enjoy this type of content, it would mean a lot if you could support the channel. But until next time folks, this is Moon talking about BG Blitz and signing out.